Paul Solomon had just found the bullet-riddled body of his wife, Betty Jean, lying on the living room floor of their suburban New York apartment. But lead detective Richard Constantino couldn't understand why Solomon had no blood on him.
Paul Solomon said when he arrived home, she was face down and he rolled her body over.
And Constantino isn't happy to learn that the first police officers at the crime scene had allowed Solomon to wash his hands and change his bloody clothes.
Well, there's a possibility of losing items of evidence, either trace evidence or gunshot residue, especially if you wash your hands.
Sure enough, when Solomon's hands are tested for residue that might have placed the murder weapon in his hands.
Did you find anything?
Didn't find any, no.
But Constantino is still highly suspicious of him.
Our first suspect was Paul Solomon.
Why?
Because he was the last person to see the victim, and he was the one to find the body. He pretty well made himself a suspect by his demeanor, the way he spoke, and to be honest with you, I was really leaning towards him being the shooter.
What was his demeanor like?
He was very sheepish.
And Constantino could understand why, after talking to those who knew him.
As an investigation unfolded, we found out he was, if you want to call it, a serial adulterer. You know, so he had many affairs through the years.
But Solomon gave police a thorough account of what he did the day his wife was murdered.
Woke up in the morning, made love, and he just hung around the house all day long watching TV.
Which his wife, tragically, is no longer alive to verify. But 40-year-old Solomon's 25-year-old lover, Carolyn Warmus, would confirm at least part of what else Solomon told police he did that day.
He received a phone call from Carolyn in the afternoon and made plans to meet her for her birthday later on in the evening.
At a nearby Holiday Inn where they had drinks before Solomon gave her a special birthday present.
And you were intimate in the parking lot, in the car.
And he was in my car.
Having sex.
Right.
But Paul Solomon still isn't off the hook. Because of the timeline, the medical examiner estimates Betty Jean died between 2 and 6 p.m. Police figure her husband had more than enough time to murder her.
We kind of kept him on the top of the list as a suspect.
But something strange would happen hundreds of miles away that suddenly makes Carolyn the focus of the investigation.
I said, whoa, okay, this woman, so Warmus, you know, she's going to extremes here.
Solomon had dumped Carolyn for another female teacher soon after his wife's murder. And police say an insanely jealous and furious Carolyn followed Solomon and his new girlfriend all the way from New York to Puerto Rico, where they had gone for a romantic getaway. Carolyn frantically trying to confront Solomon face to face.
So what happened there in Puerto Rico?
She made numerous phone calls, attempts to his room that he didn't respond to. And when he refused to see her, the security people in hotels said that she was acting strange.
But Carolyn tells an entirely different story.
Were you stalking Paul Solomon?
No. He invited me down to Puerto Rico. I called down there and told him what time my flight was going to be arriving. So, you know, be there to pick me up, but he was pursuing me. And rekindling the relationship, you know, wasn't the other way around.
Solomon and his new girlfriend would flee back to New York, where he tells police Carolyn had made them fear for their safety.
She wanted Paul Solomon and she's going to go to any extreme to get him.
But Carolyn claims Solomon had lured her into a trap so he could get the heat off himself by portraying her to police as an unstable woman with a fatal attraction so obsessive that she was capable of killing his wife.
Do you think he was trying to frame you?
Absolutely.
So you think this was all a plot by him to drag you into the investigation and shift the focus to you?
Absolutely.
And if that was really the plan, it worked.
So now I'm going to give a little bit more credence to her as a suspect.
And police would find a suspicious pattern of behavior when they dug into Carolyn's love life.
She had a proclivity of going after married men, unattainable men.
Among them, they say, was another man who took legal action to stop her from stalking him and his fiancée.
One couple said that they had to get a restraining order against you. Is that true?
Well, we did a reciprocal restraining order, that he was not going to come near me, my family, the office, or anything like that. So that's what that was about. Nobody wants to describe it in its entirety.
Police would also uncover other evidence against Carolyn. The most damaging being allegations that she bought a .25 caliber Beretta with a silencer, just like the one used to shoot Betty Jean Solomon, 9 times. And proof suggesting she purchased bullets for the gun on the very day of the murder. Plus a passionate motive.
What do you think of that motive that the prosecution said you killed Betty Jean Solomon because you wanted her husband all to yourself?
Paul Solomon said that he and his wife were planning to get divorced. So what would be the purpose? What would be the gain, the benefit for me? It's not even something that I would consider. I mean, that's like out of a soap opera.
But a year after the murder, police would charge Carolyn with killing Mrs. Solomon, even though they had no physical evidence linking her to the crime.
I would have liked to have a smoking gun. I would have liked to have a signed confession. I would have liked to have a giant stadium filled with witnesses, but we didn't.
And that glove, photographed lying near Mrs. Solomon's body but not collected as evidence, would mysteriously vanish. Her husband, Paul, saying he can't find it in his apartment.
So ultimately, in your case, there was no forensic evidence,
Right.
no eyewitnesses,
Right.
no murder weapon.
Right. It was a completely circumstantial case.
Next, the fatal attraction trial of Carolyn Warmus turns into a sensational media circus.
For you to stand there and say that I could do that to my wife or to anybody is obscene.
And the defense shocks the courtroom, pointing the finger in a direction nobody saw coming.
They could just as well be reasons for you to kill Betty Jean Solomon.
The visual image of Carolyn getting out of the limousine with the hat on and the short skirt and the sunglasses may have presented an image of somebody having something to hide, being somewhat mysterious.